So let's go into a little bit of the only reason why I am not an Olympian, right? So we're going to have our two examples right over here of our sea level blood, and then let's say this is blood that's been adapted to the environment here in Laramie. So let's go through our normal sea level example first. If we think about that blood, we're going to carry that in a dump truck, which is our hemoglobin, right? And we said at normal resting values, we get about 98% saturation, right? We talked about that little oxygen sensor. And if we have about 14.8 grams per deciliter of hemoglobin, right? That's what's going to happen. 98% of 14.8 grams means that there's 14.5 grams of hemoglobin per deciliter available to carry that blood. Great. Because then, when we get to our muscle, that red blood cell with all those oxygen molecules bound within it can offload those into the muscle, and through the process with oxygen and carbohydrates here, we can make some ATP. Well, what does that mean? For exercise intensity, when exercise intensity is low, we're happy because we have all that capacity. When exercise intensity is high, same thing. That partial pressure is getting lower in our muscles. We can offload more of that. We're doing good. What happens when we get to altitude? All right, let's take that Laramie blood. Now, our hemoglobin has increased from 14.8 grams per deciliter all the way up to 15.3 grams per deciliter. But what's happened is the percentage of that 15.3 that we can use to carry oxygen is actually lower. Because the partial pressure on that oxygen saturation curve is a little bit further to the left, that means we can't saturate it at 100% or 98%. We can only saturate 85%. So even though we got a bigger dump truck now with a nice big bed on the back of it, we can only fill it 85% of the way. And 85% of 15.3 is 13. 13 is less than 14.5 for all the math majors out there. So what happens when we bring this here is, we don't have the same offloading capacity that we had when we were 98% saturated, right? We're not bringing as much oxygen from the lungs to the working muscles. And in Laramie, what this means is low exercise intensity, we're still good. We're feeling great because we don't have to use the maximum capacity of that oxygen offloading. The partial pressure in the muscles when we're exercising at moderate or low intensity is not much lower than 40. So we can still release enough oxygen to supply the mitochondria with their needs for ATP generation. Here's the trouble. When we get to high intensity, because we have less capacity now we have our big frowny face. Meaning that even if you are adapted, your blood has more red blood cells in it, your hematocrit is higher than it was before you moved to altitude, our ability to exercise at high intensity has gone down. That is not a good thing, because if you are training for an aerobic sport, let's say you're a 5K runner, you're not doing all of your training at low intensity. You're doing some of your training at high intensity. What does that high intensity training do? It results in training adaptations. As you exercise at a higher intensity, your body's going to respond to that with even more oxygen utilization in your body. You can run at a faster pace. But if I can't train at this high intensity or as high as I could when I was at sea level, now over time, I'm not going to get the same adaptations. So hopefully now you can see why just living at high altitude isn't enough to make you an Olympian. It's the only reason. If not for this state here in Laramie and the state of our hemoglobin saturation, I would be on the Olympic team. I'd be wearing my USA garb right now. But unfortunately, you can't fight physics and you can't fight physiology. But let's move on a little bit. I think we can even think about this a little bit more.